when I can be stuck in the council chamber for 4 weeks, but never mind. Just before we begin, we have a few formalities to go through. Basically, just to say, obviously, that we're all here to for the hearings for the examination of the Lewisham Local Plan 2020 to 2040 submission draft. For ease, I shall now refer to that as the plan. My name is Caroline Malloy, and this is my colleague Rachel Best, and we are both Chartered Town Planners. We have been appointed by the Secretary of State under Section 20 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 to hold this examination into the soundness of and to produce a report of our conclusions and recommendations with regards to soundness. Just a few housekeeping matters. Can we please make sure that our phones and laptops, etc., are switched to silent, please, so we don't have any necessary interruptions. I'd also like to take the opportunity to introduce Ian Kemp, who's sitting over there, who you probably either spoken to or met before. Ian is the Programme Officer for the examination. He works for us and independently from the Council, and he's responsible for all administrative arrangements. Outside the hearing sessions, any contact you make with us should be through the Programme Officer, through Ian. Just to say, Ian will be in attendance week 1, 3 and 4 of the examination. He's involved in another examination week 2 because he's very popular, he's in demand. So he won't actually be here for week 2, but he's still responsible for the administration arrangements in terms of responding to emails, any queries that you may have, exchanging documents, that kind of thing. So if Ian isn't here next week, please email him with any queries. There will be an officer of the council in attendance in week 2 to make sure that the room's set up and also to deal with any immediate inquiries that you may have regarding the venue, etc. Before we move on, can I just ask the Council to advise on a few housekeeping matters, such as where the toilets are, fire exits, and also whether a fire alarm is planned at all today. On to that, yes. The sessions are being live streamed, just so everybody is aware. Are there any concerns, objections to that? Okay, thank you. Oh, thank you for that. Just in terms of the layout and seating arrangements, any members of the public or other interested parties who wish to just simply observe, if you could just sit at the back, you are there. The usual conventions apply in that there will be 1 seat at the table per participant, and any supporters would need to sit behind. Obviously, we'd slightly restricted space. It will depend on the number of participants at each session, though. Where there are a number of people attending as part of a group or organisation, we would ask that you try to have a spokesperson, nominate 1 spokesperson in order to minimise disruption from seat swapping, etc., just to make things. As you can see, we do have an audio system in place with microphones available at each seat. I think we will use those because it is quite a large venue, just to make sure that everybody hear what everyone's saying. Also help to save our voices a little bit as well. But I would ask that if you need to speak, obviously switch the microphone on. There's a button there if you're not familiar with that. But also when you stop speaking, if you could switch the mic off. I'm really bad for not doing that, so Rachel might have to give me a nudge. But otherwise, I don't think the acoustics work so well. But also, it's important to use a mic because we are being live streamed as well, just so people can hear what we're saying. Just to check, is there anyone from the press present here today? Speak now if ever hold your peace. No? We've covered the live streaming. Is there anyone else who intends to film or record the proceedings other than live streaming? Just in terms of refreshments, actually, I noticed there was tea and coffee facilities there, just to keep us going on the longer sessions, which is helpful. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Best now. We're doing a bit of a double act today.
Thank you. So in terms of our role, as inspectors, we're required to assess whether the plan satisfies the legal and procedural requirements of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004, together with its associated relevant regulations, so whether it's sound. So you'll have seen on the Council's documentation and the representation forms these words of soundness. So in order to be sound, we have the National Planning Policy Framework, and that tells us that plans should be positively prepared, justified, effective and consistent with national policy. So in submitting the plan, the Council consider that the plan is sound, and that's the starting point for the examination. So where anyone's challenging that soundness, then it's about explaining how the plan is unsound and what do you think would make the plan sound. And the hearing sessions are part of that process in that regard. So in terms of soundness and the outcomes of the examination, there are three possible outcomes to the examination. So firstly, the submitted plan is sound and legally compliant and no modifications are necessary. I have to say that's very unusual for plans that come in. The second outcome is that the submitted plan is not sound but could be made sound by changes or a bit of further work by the Council. And the third outcome is that the submitted plan is not sound and can't be made sound by changes. Now, when I say changes, I'll just say a few words about changes. So once a plan has been submitted, there are only two ways in which changes can be made. So that's main modifications, recommended by the inspectors, and additional modifications made by the Council on adoption. So the Council has formally requested that we recommend any main modifications that are necessary to make the plan sound, and that's in their letter LC25, which is now on the website. Thank you. So we can only recommend main modifications if they're necessary to resolve problems that would otherwise make the plan unsound. So main modifications are those that would materially alter the plan or its policies. And in the interests of fairness, those main modifications will be subject to consultation after the hearing sessions, and there may be further sustainability appraisal work that might be needed to accompany those. The additional modifications I mentioned, they're changes which do not materially affect the policies of the plan. So they're made by the Council on adoption. Sometimes they get referred to as minor modifications, but the additional modifications do not fall within the scope of the examination. So it's for the Council to be accountable for them. Generally, they involve sort of factual updates or correction of typographical errors that have been spotted since submission. So the Council has proposed a number of changes to the plan in the schedule of proposed modifications, so that's PD 11. We have had an updated version that we've just had printed, so thank you for that. But we need to stress that at this stage, the suggested modifications are just that. So our role is to assess whether the submitted plan is sound, and we'll discuss those proposed modifications as we go along. So we ask that the council is proactive about this and make sure we cover all of the modifications you're suggesting, and to everyone else, keep an eye on that. Anyone who's objected to the plan and have suggested changes, and we'll try and go through those as we go through each agenda on each topic. Also, as we go along, could we ask that you start thinking about whether any sustainability appraisal work would be necessary alongside those proposed modifications, and again for all participants to flag that up if necessary. Now, as the hearing progresses, could we request that the council prepares a running schedule of the changes that you're proposing, supporting, or have no objections to, if we can keep on top of those as we go along. And then if by the end of the final hearing session we've got a composite version of that, so usually within sort of 1 to 2 weeks following the final hearing session, if that's all together, then we can look at that as one document. So we're happy for you to show additions as underlined, deletions struck through. And obviously we will need to see that draft schedule of modifications before it starts its consultation process later on. So the hearing sessions themselves, we have a guidance note, IN2. So that outlines the procedures that we're going to be following at the hearing sessions, the way in which the written representations will be dealt with, the availability of information, and the way in which participants and everyone involved is expected to conduct themselves during the hearing sessions. So the hearing programme, which Mr. Kemp is keeping a close eye on, keeping it up to date for us, that's published on the examination website. So we intend to follow that overall structure. There are no immediate changes to the programme or the participants, but we need to keep an eye on that as the examination progresses. So there may be some tweaks. It's usually around the availability of participants to the actual sessions. So in terms of timings, the sessions will run from 9:30 till around about 11, where we'll take a short break. Then about 11:30 to 1, so we'll do two sessions in the morning. And then the afternoon sessions, 2 o'clock till about 3:30, again, a short break. And then we hope to finish no later than 5, although we need to be a little flexible about that. If we're almost at the end of one matter, then hopefully we can finish that off. So the hearing sessions themselves are a form of a structured discussion, so which we will lead. We've got an agenda based on the matters, issues and questions that have already been circulated. We're both going to sit in all hearing sessions, so we can both hear and see what everybody's talking about. We'll invite people to speak at particular times. On the agenda, we might have identified certain participants at different stages. If you have something to contribute at the appropriate time in the discussion, if you can pop your nameplate on its end, that would be helpful. We will try and bring you in as soon as possible, and we'll keep an eye, and that's one of the benefits of having both of us to sit together. You'll only be allowed to contribute when you've made a point related to your duly submitted representation on a particular issue. So please bear that in mind. You know, we have read all the original representations, so we do have a good overview of it. So the hearing sessions themselves are not an opportunity to submit anything further unless it's something that we need to hear something further on. So comments that you make during the sessions are related specifically to your representations that you made originally at the submission stage. But if you want to highlight certain parts of your statement, your documents, your representation, that would be helpful to us and to everyone if you could point out the document references or the page numbers, the paragraph numbers. Now, there may be some matters, issues and questions on which we've now got enough information. So there may be little or no discussion on those. And we have 12 days planned for the hearing sessions with a reserve day. So we're aiming to end the hearing sessions on Thursday, the 18th of July. That's the plan.
Just to say as well, I think if everybody could be respectful of other participants as well, allow people to finish, and just a reminder to talk through us rather than across the table at each other. It can get a little difficult if participants do that, so just always sort of raise your hand and speak to us, speak through us, and no heckling at the back. I'm sure you'll be well behaved. In terms of the site visits, we have conducted most, if not all of the site visits from public vantage points. Any remaining site visits will be undertaken in between the hearing sessions, and we will do this unaccompanied unless we find we need to go onto private land. I'm not aware of any sites that we've come across so far that need to be accessed by private land, but if there are any, if the council could flag those up, so we need to make the necessary arrangements. We've been to most sites. So as we're going through, if there are any sites in particular, just let us know. So in terms of what happens after the hearing sessions, the examination will remain open after the hearing sessions have ended. However, at that stage, we will not accept any further representations or evidence unless we have specifically requested it. And just, I think, before we move on, I'd firstly like to say that both of us have sat at the other side of the table, and we very much know just how much work goes into preparing a local plan behind the scenes, and also in terms of attendance at the hearing sessions and preparation for the hearing sessions. So we very much appreciate, particularly for a small team, how much work has gone into the plan. And secondly, I'd just like to say as well, I think we're all here to achieve the same purpose, which is work towards a sound plan to guide development over the next 20 years or so, for the benefit really of the council, the public and developers alike. So we're not here to catch you out, but we do need to test the plan thoroughly. And hopefully ourselves, the council and all participants can work in a positive and pragmatic way through the hearing sessions to achieve this common goal. I also wanted to say what a privilege it is to be working here. We were here a few weeks ago to do the site visits, and I think it really struck both of us that Lewisham has a real energy and vibe to it, and there's something from a regeneration point of view as well. And I think there's a clear willingness and drive to make things happen. And I think it also struck us what a strong sense of community there is in Lewisham as well. And I think hopefully getting a plan in place will help to facilitate those regeneration objectives. So just before we move on, does anyone have any questions about anything we've covered in the opening announcements at this stage?
Just one thing, there is one site, SA1, which is private, but you could get access, some information. So that's the Lewisham Memorial Hall and the gas holder site.
Just a reminder, if you could announce who you are before you speak. I'm sure we'll all get used to it through the hearing sessions. We've taken a note of that, and we'll discuss it and get back to it. I understand that the council would like to make 2 opening statements. Is that correct? Who's leading on that?
I'll go first. Thank you. I'm Jennifer Dowsong. I'm Chief Executive of Lewisham Council. So, good morning, inspectors, residents, other participants, and of course, council officers. I'm really pleased to be able to wish you a warm welcome to Catford today for the start of our local plan hearing sessions on behalf of Lewisham Council. The opening of the hearing session signals a key milestone in Lewisham's plan-making process. When I joined the council in 2021, we'd just finished the work on the new local plans preparation under Regulation 18. It feels like it was a long time ago. There's a lot that's happened, and there's likely to be a lot more that happens once this hearing is over. Unlike many other local authorities over the past year, though, we were really keen to push ahead with the adoption of our local plan for the reasons that you've already outlined. During my time here in Lewisham and since the submission of the local plan, I've had the privilege and the honour to oversee further development of the new local plan through its subsequent preparation, publication and submission. As you all know, producing a local plan really is a widely shared endeavour, and in producing this plan, the Council has engaged extensively with our local residents, our communities, including amenity societies and neighbourhood fora, our businesses, infrastructure providers, developers, landowners, statutory agencies, and of course the Mayor of London. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all those in our communities who've participated in helping us to get to this point. And if I may, in particular, our fantastic planning colleagues past and present who've worked tirelessly to produce a new local plan that is resoundingly positive in its outlook and the product of deep local engagement. Throughout, the Council has remained committed to securing a new, ambitious and inclusive local plan that delivers for all of its residents and communities. Contained within the local plan is a shared blueprint for future opportunity, access to homes, jobs, education, open and natural spaces, and sustainable travel modes. It is a statement of ambition that is already beginning to bear fruit and is clearly evidenced by the positive changes taking place across the borough. The new local plan is a key document in the Council's arsenal being deployed to make Lewisham the place that its residents and communities deserves. Inspectors, I'm certain you'll hear more about these achievements over the coming weeks. We firmly believe that we have a robust and deliverable plan that responds positively in providing new housing, particularly genuinely affordable homes, new shops and business opportunities, improved public, open, green and natural spaces. It takes ownership of the challenge of climate change, promotes sustainable travel choices and reduced car usage, secures new buildings and places that are of high quality and reflect our rich and diverse heritage. We are all acutely aware of the legacy of our decisions which will leave for future generations. New development cannot be easily undone, and placemaking undertaken over the next 15 years will need to endure for the next century and beyond. The decision to submit the new local plan was not taken lightly. I believe it particularly noteworthy that the decision to submit was unanimously supported at full council by our elected members. Our confidence in the new local plan strategy sends out a clear message that Lewisham is ready for good and inclusive growth and successful placemaking. We will work tirelessly with communities, businesses and partners to ensure that the borough grows and prospers in a sustainable and inclusive way. We will protect the things that the borough is so special for and allow and help our communities to flourish. We expect to share responsibility for delivering our vision with our partners, our major investment partners, and support coming from all sectors as we step into our future together. It is my pleasure to commend our local plan to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fenwick.
Thank you very much. I'm Nick Fenwick. I'm the Director of Planning here at Lewisham. So moving on from our introduction from our Chief Executive, I'd just like to share a few thoughts from a more technical point of view. Firstly, to begin with, I'd like to say a little bit about how we arrived here today and the engagement and collaborative working with a variety of partners that has underpinned our journey. Fundamentally, collaboration has allowed us to build broad support for the new local plan. Critically, it has helped us overcome the challenge of selling the message of growth. Placemaking is about delivering successful places that have qualities that will endure. The work extends beyond the statutory requirements of the plan-making process. So over the next few weeks, you'll hear from my colleagues. You will also hear about the work we've done with the development industry and infrastructure partners to deliver the growth and investment on the ground in order to secure and deliver good placemaking through the development management process and beyond into physical implementation. You will also hear from partners who I hope will paint a positive picture of who we are and how we are positively working together to deliver an open Lewisham. You will appreciate that such close working isn't always easy, and that we don't always agree with each other on matters of detail, which I'm sure you'll hear about over the coming weeks. But I can assure you that our new local plan is broadly supported in terms of its objectives, I want to get that right, spatial strategy, planning policies, and site allocations. This has come through hard work across and outside of the plan-making process and is exemplified by a collective commitment to secure the best for the borough. I would like to believe that this is reflected in the submission that you have before you. I would also highlight there is little in the way of fundamental objection and practically no alternative objection sites. This, in my experience, is unusual and is an opportune position for all those involved in this process. Secondly, I think it's important to highlight that in submitting the new local plan, we have not shirked away from the challenges of accommodating and facilitating the new growth that Lewisham needs. With our colleagues and partners across the capital and southeast London in particular, we've identified the scale of new growth needed to meet Lewisham's and the capital's needs. Importantly, we've looked very carefully to assess and determine how best our new growth can be accommodated. Over the examination, you will hear about the technical evidence that has informed that process. I think it's important to note that the new local plan has throughout been informed by appropriate and proportionate technical evidence, and that it is a part that and the technical evidence says that open the opportunity for the borough to accommodate its full needs, whether that be in relation to delivering genuinely affordable homes, the new housing identified through the London plan, or the shops and jobs that will be coming to places such as Deptford, New Cross, Lewisham, Catford, Bell Green and Sydenham. We've not sought to avoid this responsibility, both in terms of our plan making, but also, as I've already mentioned, in relation to ongoing decision making. I can proudly say that we're seeking to meet our responsibilities in full, to do our share in meeting London's needs and those of the wider region. I suggest there are a few places in the southeast that can justifiably make that claim. While the council continues to meet its side of the bargain and maintain a steady supply of deliverable and developable sites throughout its plan-making and decision-making process, the multitude of site allocations and consents does not always translate into on-the-ground delivery, completions and sales. No doubt you will hear some of the reasons that may account for poor delivery on the ground, and that is not something I wish to dwell on just at this moment. What I do want to clearly say is that we remain committed to delivering the significant boost in housing delivery that we are being told to facilitate, and that over the next few weeks you will hear how we left no stone unturned in our pursuit of resolving this matter. You will hear how demonstrably challenging real-world conditions are, not just for the council as a consenting authority, but also for its partners involved in actual delivery. Nevertheless, we remain confident that we have submitted a plan that continues to be positively prepared in respect of Lewisham's specific needs. It's perhaps Worth reminding ourselves at this point that Lewisham is an urban inner London borough and is undeniably different from most places in England. We cannot simply plan or deliver growth by master planning for a strategic urban extension, a new school or hospital, or supporting new roads. We literally don't have the space in the conventional sense for this sort of development. We really do have to approach plan making and infrastructure planning in a smarter way. We genuinely have to optimise what we already have available. This could not be truer than our transport networks. Lewisham is a highly accessible place, and that provides a gilt-edged opportunity for placemaking. As many of you will know from experience, you don't drive a motor vehicle just to get around the borough or indeed to travel beyond its boundary. The new local plan seeks to build upon that basis and secure a future where residents and communities can genuinely make the choice to be car-free. This will bring so many benefits, not for just physical placemaking, but also in response to climate change, but in terms of health and well-being, and financially, with the burden of car ownership being lifted. We're working with our partners, the Mayor, London, Transport for London and Network Rail, to deliver those choices and opportunities. This is perhaps ultimately exemplified through the Bakerloo line extension, an investment of national importance that will bring travel and economic benefits across the capital, and critically will also set the borough up for future plan making beyond the life of the new local plan. I would suggest that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity that should not be missed. In summary, I'd like to commend the new local plan to the inspectors and suggest that this is an opportunity to positively progress plan making and facilitate decision making in a timely manner. By doing so, I hope that we can quickly secure an adopted plan that gives us all the confidence to deliver growth, the investment on the ground, something that Lewisham and London needs to happen. This is not an idle claim, but a position that is supported by evidence and through the ongoing collaboration with our partners and stakeholders. We want to get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those positive thoughts. Is the council happy to have your opening statements on the examination?
We put them on that.
If you could make those available
Sure.
to Ian. Okay, so we'll move on to matter 1 now, in terms of legal compliance, before moving on to the duty to cooperate. Does everyone have a copy of the circulated agenda? If not, I think there are some spare copies on the table there. Anyone want to take the opportunity to get an agenda? So just to remind everybody taking part in the discussion that you should have already provided all of your evidence in your original representation, and that the hearing session is not an opportunity to submit anything further. So any comments made during the hearing session should relate to the points in your original representation. We have read your original representations and hearing statements, so there's no need to repeat what you've already said. The purpose of this session is really for us to seek clarification or further information on any outstanding questions. We are very conscious of the timetable. It is quite a challenging timetable. And on that basis, there may be some matters upon which we feel we have enough evidence, so we won't necessarily ask questions on those matters, so we can make most efficient use of hearing time. So I just wanted to flag that up in case we're going over a particular topic. I can see you twitching there. Would you like to raise a point?
Please, this is Julia Webb, the Belgreen Forum. Please excuse me if because I'm not familiar with this format exactly, but there's some issues which I already raised in my statement, but there's further information about the difficulty of contributing to consultations. and the fact that we haven't actually been able to have a discussion about things that are absolutely vital to the development of Belgreen, and are being held back because of this lack of consultation.
Coming on to that,
Okay.
what I would say though is that we don't want to receive lots of additional information, so it's only really the information related to your original representation. Otherwise, we do have a copy of representation here. We will have to stop you if we feel that you're straying from your original reps, and the council may highlight that as well. So just a reminder to try and stick to your original, please. So if there aren't any other questions, without further ado, can I ask the participants for this morning's session to introduce yourselves, starting with the council.
I'm Angela Stewart, working for the policy team.
Good morning, inspectors. Karol Jakubczyk. I'm the council's planning policy manager.
Good morning. I'm David Syme. I'm the head of strategic planning at Lewisham.
Morning. I don't have a microphone actually, but this might be okay. My name is Mark Fessy. I'm a consultant from ACOM, and I led on the IIA, the Integrated Impact Assessment for the local plan.
Didn't quite catch your name, and your nameplate has turned the wrong way.
Sorry.
So if you could just repeat your name.
It's Mark Fessy.
Hi, Chris Fraser, and I'm a policy officer at the Lewisham Council.
Good morning, I'm Kanoy Kabir. I'm a strategic planning officer for Lewisham Council.
Good morning. As the council has spoken, I just want to say a couple of words just by way of introduction. It's just very briefly.
We don't normally have opening statements from.
It's not a statement. It's just to say who I am. That's all. My name is Alan Hall. I was a local councillor. That's what I need to get this on the record. I was a local councillor, but I'm no longer a local councillor. I was a local councillor for Bellingham from 2006 to 2018, and it's also important to mention that I was the lead non-executive councillor for planning and constitutional matters at the council. So it's a declaration of interest as well, in that sense that I do have some experience in these matters, and I just want to say why I'm here. The representation that I made did cover the ward that I represented, and it did represent views that I had gathered from people around the ward. It wasn't just the Belgreen Neighbourhood Forum, it was other people in the ward. But as I said, as I have the responsibility for leading non-executive matters and planning, I also have included some issues that cover the wider London Borough of Lewisham area. I'm very aware that my responsibilities extended across the borough. So that's all I wanted to say, but thank you very much for giving us the opportunity today. Thanks.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Hall. I think you're quite like me. You're quite softly spoken, so if you could just, next time you speak, if you could just shout up a little bit, that would be helpful.
Hello, my name is Julia Webb, and I'm chair of the Belgreen Forum. This is a group of over 100 local residents, business owners, and people working in the Belgreen area. We got together because we wanted to form a neighbourhood forum, because we're concerned about the lack of progress. We've been campaigning for development of Belgreen for a very long time. We included an expert panel of about a dozen members with professional experience in development, architects, chartered engineers in different disciplines, transport engineers, environmental impact specialists. So I'm just here sort of representing the team. Thank you.
Just a couple of points of clarification. So you do have authority to represent the Belgreen Forum, first of all, because that doesn't always happen. But also, is it the Belgreen Forum, we have seen other names like Neighbourhood Group, I think, and it's just to clarify that we have the correct name.
Yes, we were formed as the Belgreen Neighbourhood Forum, but we were blocked from forming one. And therefore, and then we were carrying on under the same name on the basis we were reapplying, but we had a lot of interference politically, so we have just renamed ourselves just to keep everyone calm down while this is sorted out. It was not done lawfully, according to the rules. So, but we were told, if you don't agree with us, you'll have to take us to court, which we're not in a position to fund. So that's the situation.
Okay, thank you. We don't need to know the ins and outs, just so we refer to the correct. You're happy to be referred to as a Belgreen Forum. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. So if we start now moving through the agenda, and firstly looking at plan preparation and public consultation. Firstly, in terms of the local development scheme, I have seen the council's written representation, so I don't feel we need to go into that in great detail. I'm happy to take that as read. But I just had a couple of questions. Could you just sort of summarise at what key stages the LDS has been updated, and if there were any sort of key slippages and what the reasons were for that in terms of plan preparation?
Yes, I think the short answer, inspectors, is that the local development scheme was on track through Regulation 19, so up to publication, consultation on publication, and subsequently to submission. So the scheme is now, as per the council's response to Matter 1, MIQ 1.1, the scheme is now not in accordance with the actual real-world timetable of the plan moving through the process. And I would reiterate, as per paragraph 1.13, the council is prepared to review its local development scheme. I would also briefly add, in my experience, that this is not an unusual situation for the council to find itself in. Thank you.
If I may just add to that, obviously through the plan preparation period, we've had some unusual events, to say the least, not least several general elections, COVID, etc. So we have been trying to keep our LDS up to date as much as possible, but you'll appreciate that external factors have meant that has proved difficult at times. So we did update the local development scheme through our Mayor and Cabinet Committee in 2018. Then we followed that up by a new LDS in December 2020, prior to the Regulation 18 consultation, and then again in December 2022. So 3 revisions through the kind of process. We've also used the Authority Monitoring Report, which is published annually, as a record of where we are with the plan.
You referred to potentially updating the LDS. What's the timetable for that?
We would seek to be guided by the inspectors, if I could respectfully suggest that, as is normal. I say as is normal in my limited experience.
Let's see how we get on during the course of the hearings. Okay, I think that's the only questions I had in terms of the LDS. Thank you for that. Moving on to the preparation of the plan, and in particular notification, consultation and publication submission of the documents. Again, I note the evidence in your written statements, and obviously you point to the duty to cooperate statement, which we'll on to. Reg 22 consultation statement and the Reg 18 consultation statement. which sets out a record, if you like, of the public consultation that has taken place. Now, I am aware that there have been comments from both Mr. Hoare and the Belgreen Forum who've raised the issue of the impact of the pandemic on Reg 18 consultation, which you touched on there. Can I just ask the Council on that basis to set out how the Council adapted its consultation to reflect the more limited opportunities like for face-to-face consultation, and how it overcame the challenges of that, if you like.
Yeah, I can pick that up, and then maybe if any detailed questions, I can hand over to Christopher, who was in charge at that time of our kind of consultation approach. I think it's important to fundamentally note that the consultation was carried out in due regard to the regulations and in accordance to our statement of community involvement that was adopted. Indeed, the timescale, publicity and activities carried out went above and beyond the statutory minimum that was set out with our statement of community involvement. We acknowledge that the Regulation 18 consultation was undertaken during COVID restrictions, but also, again, I think it's important to note the context and direction from the government and MHCLG at the time. So, the planning guidance, which was published in May 2020, clearly stated that local plan preparation should continue and that SEIs and policies within those SEIs consistent with that guidance should be changed so that proactive consultation on local plans could continue, which is exactly what the Council did. The guidance also suggested the use of modern technologies, including internet and online platforms, and that was strongly encouraged. So that is what the Council did. We set up an online engagement platform, which was very well received. We had over 13,000 people coming to that platform. In terms of benchmarking our Regulation 18 consultation in terms of success, we had over 1,400 responses to our consultation with thousands of comments, which the Council went through each one and responded to individually. We also had a series of online information sessions, so 16 of those, where we went through sections and components of the local plan. Those were incredibly well attended. They were recorded and uploaded onto our website as well, so that other people could look at those. In terms of notification and publicity, again, the Council went above and beyond our statement of community involvement. This included adverts in the local press, a comprehensive social media campaign, site notices placed for all site allocations around the sites, a half-page spread in Lewisham Life, which is the council magazine that goes to all residents within the borough, and many more. We have benchmarked the 1,400 responses against Regulation 18 consultation held within the capital in the last 5 years, and it represents one of the best response rates for any Regulation 18 local plan. Fortunately, we were picked to the post by Southwark, our neighbouring borough, but nevertheless, it represents a successful consultation. I think one of the key points that we were concerned about through the process is engagement with seldom heard groups, which obviously with the digital inequality we were very concerned about. After the Regulation 18 consultation, the online platform, we did some targeted events, 10 targeted events, once the restrictions had been lifted with seldom heard groups, which again, I think we had and he's looking to Chris in terms of the number of people, but you know, several hundred people there, providing comments and responding to the questions that we were asking them through that process. Chris, do you want to clarify how many?
Yeah, so just to clarify on that process, so with the seldom heard group, so we had 200 participants involved over those 10 sessions, with 90 additional surveys completed that we incorporated into the Regulation 18 responses. And I think it's important to maybe note that we were concerned with the reach to the seldom heard groups that and the digital access that a lot of groups don't have, and with purely online consultation, that's something that within the team that we were very aware of. Just to kind of give you a few stats around, the diversity. So we had 58% of the consultees within those extra sessions that we held were Black Caribbean, Black African, or mixed or multiple ethnic backgrounds. 19% of the respondents were people with disabilities. 15% LGBTQ plus respondents, and 65% of that overall we would have considered a younger response. So we felt that it was really beneficial to continue those. And I think one of the with the restrictions, the COVID restrictions being lifted in, I think it was June 2022, I think 2021. So being able to sort of get out and have those face-to-face meetings and those physical meetings, I think added an extra layer to the work that we actually did with Regulation 18 consultation.
Just to finish up there, there are distinct advantages as well of having that online platform, which many people outlined, particularly the online events that we had, the 16 online events. There's a lot of people saying there that they didn't have the time to necessarily go to an event, a physical event, but actually this allowed them to essentially tune in whilst the kids were watching TV or whatever, and participate through the local process. So, overall, whilst we acknowledge that the Regulation 18 was held through the COVID restrictions, again, the context was government were encouraging us to do this, encouraging us to continue with plan making. We were keen to continue with the plan making process, particularly because of the uncertainty of when restrictions could come in again. As I said, we carried out the consultation in accordance with our statement of community involvement. We believe it is a robust, successful consultation.
Thank you for that. Yes, I think a lot of organisations, including our own, had to adapt during that time to virtual inquiries and local plan examinations and things. Just to pick up on a few points there, you mentioned that you thought it was beneficial to continue that kind of sort of engagement with seldom heard groups that you carried out at the Reg 18 stage. Did that continue as part of the Reg 19 consultation, those sort of specific consultations with the seldom heard groups? 19.
No, as part of Reg 19, there wasn't any particular kind of focus on those seldom heard groups. I think we were particularly focused at the Regulation 18 stage, at the plan preparation stage. Obviously, you're aware that the Regulation 19 is quite a kind of technical consultation around the soundness of the plan. Nevertheless, again, the consultation was held in accordance with our statement of community involvement. We actually had a shop front, or a shop unit within Lewisham Shopping Centre, which we occupied on a Saturday during the day at Lewisham Town Centre. Lewisham Town Centre and the people who go there are one of the most diverse town centres within an area. So we did try to grab as many people through that consultation into the unit to try to get their views, but there was no particularly targeted seldom outreach at that.
Interested to hear whether those seldom heard groups continue to participate in the process, having been engaged at the Reg 18 stage.
Well, I suppose in a sense that it opened up a line of communication with those groups. So some of those groups that we did engage with were sort of added to and managed on the strategic planning database. So I think just to echo David's response there, that we, from the outset of the Regulation 19 consultation, I think we looked at it differently to how we looked at it with the Regulation 18 consultation in terms of its purpose. So that's probably why there was a bit of a step back in terms of us, going to the same levels as we did for the Regulation 18 in terms of holding events and online sessions, etc. But certainly, some of those contacts that we made through those sessions, we were certainly continued to contact them as the regulations sort of suggest that we should do. Through the rest of the plan making process. So in that sense, I think we continued that.
And was the consultation, the SCI actually updated at that stage to reflect the?
So the Regulation 18 consultation was held in December 2021. The SCI was updated. I'm frantically looking for the date.
So the Regulation 18 consultation was held between January and April 2021. The addendum to the SCI was made in December 2020 in preparation for that.
Thank you for that clarification. I was just about to bring either Mr. Hall or the Belgreen Forum in at this stage. Having heard from the council in terms of the consultation that they took, and also in relation to the particular response to the pandemic, did you have any points to make at this stage?
Sorry, Julie, do you want to? Yes, I do. Thank you very much. I just want to say thank you for allowing me to speak about this. And as I said privately, so I'll say it publicly now, I do understand how difficult it is. There's no such thing as a perfect consultation. And that's why I outlined my experience. I remember doing the UDP. That's how old I am. And I know how difficult these documents are. They are massive documents, and they have far-reaching consequences, much beyond their years. We didn't expect that UDP and the subsequent documents to be lasting 20 years. They were scheduled to last something like 5 or 6. That being said, I won't go into...
Sorry to stop you in your tracks. Can I just check, can everyone hear at the back? Can you hear what Mr. at the back there?
Sorry, I'll sit a little bit further forward, but thank you for that. But as I say, I could remember the UDP. So I do know how difficult these are. And the council, the pandemic affected everybody. And we all had to grapple with that. Lewisham Council has had a great reputation in the past for specific community consultation and a community feel. And I would split the borough up, actually, because it is a big borough, geographically and in sheer numbers now. And there's Deptford, there's the south of the borough. Deptford, traditionally inner London, riverbank, think industry, think that the south of the borough has been classified as semi-urban at times, actually. More more, not rural, but semi-urban. So there is a contrast. So to go from the north to the south, there is quite a contrast across the borough. And then we have the Lewisham town centre itself. Now, Lewisham town centre isn't used by everybody in the borough by any manner of means. But again, it's great that the council have a shop front there and a face-to-face. I think it's a marvellous idea, and I have no argument with that. But what I did, the point that I made in my representation, never been answered, and I've never been asked for why I put it in the representation either. I need to make that point. No one's ever asked me about my representation. That's why I'm here. And that was that at the same time, concurrently, the council was consulting on changes to the SCI, which is, to my mind, that is wholly in the gift of the council when to do that consultation and the sequence of events. And to do it concurrently, the regulation, I think it's the regulation 18 and the changes to the SCI, what that did, and I had all sorts of amenity societies, people interested in planning more generally, contacting me saying, what's going on? They found it confusing. I found it confusing. These changes that were being proposed, they were immediate changes about the conduct of planning committees, how long people got to make representations. These were pressing matters, and people felt that they really needed to focus their attention on this rather than the longer term 20-year problem, as it were, or aspiration. And so there's only a limited amount of community capacity to consult. You know, I would call it social capital, and the social capital was diverted into the immediate consultation. And this one went from the back burner. So I could flip it. I could be difficult to the council and flip it and say some of the usual suspects never responded. And I would expect some of the planning leads from amenity societies would have some quite strong views on elements of the plan, our regulation 18. And I could ask why they're not here now. It's because they didn't respond. So they couldn't come to regulation 19 because they didn't respond. They were too focused on these immediate changes. But that may be speculation. But I still make that point that it was in the council's gift and they didn't have to concurrently consult. And I think, for my mind, that was a flaw. I think that was a flaw. The other technical point, and it is technocratic, and I get called technocratic at times, and that is, which SCI are we talking about? Because which one was in place? Was it the old original one from way back when, 2008-ish? Was it an amended, addended one, the one that was amended for COVID? Or was it the new one? And I think that did cause confusion. To my mind, it reverted back to the original 2008 one, which is very out of date, actually. But it reverted back to that. But I'm no lawyer. But my point, the point I'm trying to make is the confusion that it caused, in my mind, did create a flaw in the consultation process. And that flaw was significant.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I'd like to bring in Mr. Syme to respond to those particular points. And I think in particular this point about the concurrent consultation on the AI and the plan.
Yeah, just to be absolutely clear, the statement of community involvement, the addendum that was approved by Mayor and Cabinet, was approved in the month of December 2020. That focused on the plan-making elements of the statement of community involvement. So all matters relating to the local plan and the plan-making process was in place and approved prior to the Regulation 18 consultation. We did consult on development management changes and constitutional changes relating to as I say, development management processes. I forget the exact date that we actually consulted on, but they had no relation to the local plan and plan-making process. We were very clear that the addendum, December 2020, related to the plan making.
What was the timing in terms of the consultation on those DM procedures in relation to the
There is no formal requirement for us to consult on changes to the statement of community involvement. So for the plan making process, we were essentially updating a document which had been in place since 2006, and we were effectively updating that to reflect guidance that we'd been provided by the government in terms of the use of online engagement as part of the process.
yes, sorry, I can't see your name plate.
It's Chris Fraser.
Mr. Fraser.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the consultation records that we have on our Citizen Space consultation portal. So just to further add to David's point, we consulted on we actually did consult on the addendum to the statement of involvement from the 2nd of October to the 13th of November 2020, and we consulted on the consultation of community involvement. So that's for the development management side from the 20th of February 2023 to the 3rd of the 4th 2020. So just to clarify those points.
Apologies for that. That's my error. So just to be clear, then, the consultation which was carried out for the SEI on the development management did not coincide with the Regulation 18 consultation. Chris, is that the case?
Oh, that's it. Our time's up. Lights out. We'll have to move around a bit more.
We're back. Yes, yeah, that's the case. So the Regulation 18 consultation did not overlap with the statement of community involvement consultation on.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back to Mr. Hall, seeing as you've raised those points. And Mr. Hall, have you read the statement of community involvement and the addendum? And if so, are there any particular aspects of those documents that you feel that the Council hasn't complied with?
I have read them. It was a long time ago, I have to say, so I can't from memory cite them. But the one thing, the reason I read them is, and this is a point I did want to raise, because it's a question really, because as I say, I'm no lawyer, but I did have responsibility for constitutional matters at the council. I always thought that the statement of community involvement was part of the constitution insofar as it is implied within the Lewisham Council's constitution. There are certain sections within the constitution that would refer to plan making or plans. It might be an appendix in the past. The other point that was mentioned is that this went through Mayor and Cabinet because it's the mayoral authority, and decision making rests with the executive, which is the Mayor and Cabinet, and the mayoral authority, but it also rests with the full council. And I do have a certain uneasiness when these sorts of plans go to a Mayor and Cabinet and do not get referred on to the full council, even though it's an all Labour authority, and you could argue about all of that. But there is a procedural matter there that, you know, these sorts of plans, I would argue, should go to the full council for ratification, because they are changes to the constitution, possibly.
Just straying off your original representations there, I will allow the council to come back on that point, but just coming back to my question, having read the statement of community involved, are there any aspects that you feel haven't been complied with in the statement of community?
As I say, I don't think that there was a full access given to members of the community. That there is that I just don't think it. I don't think that it was adequate. That's what I can say without going through the statements line by line. And I also think that the changes that were made to reflect COVID that went through the Mayor and Cabinet, that's fine. But which one was enforced? I'm still unclear which one was enforced at what time. The original or the amended, and this concurrent consultation caused confusion.
Well, Mr. Hall, you've made that point. I am very conscious of time. Did the council want to come back in terms of that signing off process, just briefly?
Yeah, very briefly, just to be absolutely clear that in terms of the Constitution, the authority is given to Mayor and Cabinet to adopt the Statement of Community.
Thank you. And Ms. Webb?
Hello. Yes. Could I just point out that the SCI, there was no need for it to be that close. There had been complaints for at least the previous 5 years that the council was acting in breach of its own SCI quite blatantly. And we were told, no, wait, it'll be reviewed in the democracy review, local democracy review. But that turned out to have no access for us to point out things. What emerged in this SCI, which was suddenly presented at the last minute, removed massive rights that people had had. It reduced the access to view comments. It removed various things about what gets referred. It also attempted, I mean, one of the reasons it distracted most of the local amenity societies is that it was wading into redefining amenity societies in a way which was unknown elsewhere, and was actually sorted out later by they accepted, they backed down, but it had been sort of voted through at council with one thing on the paper, and then in the minutes it was different.
Not quite clear what you mean by
they decided that there were conditions to be an amenity society. You had to be representing a single conservation society. That this has since been dropped, but this was another thing which hit us because we are a relatively poor, rough area. We didn't qualify to have an amenity society because that was for the more salubrious areas of Lewisham. So, I mean, that was something that affected us directly. But there was a lot of outrage. The London Forum of Amenity Societies were brought in, and they were saying, you have no right to do this. And somehow it's finally disappeared, apparently. But no one's actually said, yeah, we got that wrong. So there was a lot going on, and there was a lot of conflict. And you were having to consult simultaneously on the new, or virtually simultaneously, as non-experts. You are having to assess the new SCI while you're responding to other consultations using the previous one, or what you could work out sort of is trying to make a mashup of the various amendments. It's complete mess. And there was no need because they had plenty of notice. The SCI needed sorting out, and the local democracy review turned out just to be a sort of a seek and destroy mission.
I'm going to bring the council in just on that point in relation to immediate groups. I'm still not 100% clear on that. If the council could perhaps help me out there.
Yes, I think the participants, forgive me, they seem to be confusing two separate matters here. So matters relating to plan making processes and the local plan preparation, and the way in which the council engages through the development management process. So the matters that have been brought up relate to the latter, which were consulted on well after the Regulation 18 consultation, and resulted in a new SCI adopted in 2023. The matters relating to plan preparation and the way in which that we would consult the community on the local plan was amended, and an addendum was approved by Mayor and Cabinet in December 2020 prior to the Regulation 18 consultation. As far as I'm aware, there wasn't any particular concerns raised through the consultation for the plan-making elements of the SEI. The Council is very aware that there were objections to the development management changes, but that doesn't have any bearing on this examination.
Thank you for that. I mean, I do have to be clear that that the changes on the consultation to the development management system are not part of my remit, of our remit. It's only really in relation to the plan preparation and consultation. That's the element that we can consider. So so just to be very, very clear on that. I think I am conscious of time. I'll ask Ms. Webb the same question in relation to whether there are any particular parts of the statement community involved that you feel the Council hasn't complied with, talking about the local plan statement of community.
As I said, I think it's particularly damaging that they've removed the putting comments online, making them accessible so that people can see them, so that they can have confidence that their comment has been registered, which we don't have at the moment because it's very random. We have a major new development at the moment, which the counter stopped at 61 or something. And well, I've got more copies of objections sent in than that from the first 6 months. So, you know, it damages trust. I think stuff ought to be upfront. You ought to be able to see councillors who are going to be on planning committees ought to be able to survey general opinion without having personal contact with people. I think from every point of view, it's a democratic benefit, and they would retrospectively justify what they'd already been doing.
Okay, thank you. Ms.
Yeah, again, just to point out that this is in reference to development management processes. In terms of all responses to the consultations in Regulation 18 and 19, they were all published and all responded to individually, openly and transparently.
They're all on the examination. Right.
I can't recall. Could you just send us the details of the changes to the process, the plan making process, again? Just I would be interested to see that and to see what responses the council got, because if it got no responses, that just makes me feel that I wonder what this how this consultation was conducted. But I can't.
In relation to the responses to the local plan.
Yeah, the SEI.
Because they're all on the website.
Yeah, I think it's worth. I'd just like to go over that one again, because I'm unsure about the answers that we've just heard. I just want to double check, because I know when the letter I wrote is contemporary, and I think that there's a possible crossover of dates there, or an appearance of dates, and I just want to be clear which it is. If it's an appearance, maybe there's nothing that could be done. But if there was an actual crossover, I think that is different.
I mean, for the purposes of the examination, I think the examination website does have the relevant dates on terms of the consultation of various documents. It has all of the responses on, so I'm clear on that, and we're very clear on that. So can I ask, could the council assist Mr. Hall outside of the examination process? Would that be a way forward in terms of clarifying dates, etc.? I just don't want to take up any more valuable hearing time, if that's okay. Would that be a way forward, Mr. Hall? Webb? Is that okay? I am very conscious of time. So I'd like to move on to the next matter, which overlaps really with another matter on the agenda in relation to the strategic matters relevant to the preparation of the plan. Just very conscious of time, we do have the council's response on that in terms of the 9 strategic matters which were chosen, which are set out in the duty to cooperate statement. And we are going to pick up later in the agenda this issue, which are strategic policies, which aren't. So unless anyone's got any particular comments I want to make in terms of the strategic matters, I think we'll move on. Moving on to sustainability appraisal and the integrated impact assessment now. There is again some overlap with the questions I've raised in relation to the spatial strategy, and in particular the options considered. I'm happy to seek views on this, but given the time, we may be better off discussing those in terms of this afternoon session, in terms of spatial strategy options, rather than going over the same ground, just to save a bit of time. I think just to flag up, so the council can think about this. Just to check, actually, Mr. Fessy, is it? Are you around for this afternoon session? So you'll be able to help out in terms of that. Just to flag up, and it's probably obvious from my questioning, I think the kind of the key questions I have really are in relation to how the spatial strategy options which were set out in the integrated impact assessment, how they were then selected, how the preferred option was selected. I think that's the key area that I have some concerns over, and I think that's something that I'd like to discuss in this afternoon session, just in terms of that decision-making process. So having looked at the pros and cons of each spatial strategy option, it's then how the preferred option was selected. So I'm just going to leave that with you, and we can come back to that this afternoon, but that's a key area that I would like to explore. Setting that aside, and I think we'll come back to spatial strategy options, but can you provide me with another option, another example in terms of how the sustainability appraisal integrated impact assessment has influenced the plan in a positive way, setting aside the spatial strategy options?
Yep, thank you. So it could be quite a big question about how SA/IIA influences plan making, but of course we're not going to go there. But so focusing on the work that we've done here. So the report published at Reg 19 and then subsequently submitted is set out in 3 parts, and the equivalent interim report published at Reg 18 was set out structured identically, so the table of contents look identical. And those 3 parts tell a story over time. Part 1 is what's happened up to this point. Part 2 is what are assessment findings at this current stage, and then part 3 is next steps. So just focusing on the report for Reg 19, the one that we have in front of us now. Part 1 is where you might look to understand how work has influenced matters over time, iteratively, if you like. And part 1 of the report has 3 sections so in brief, those 3 sections are firstly defining reasonable alternatives, secondly appraising them, and then thirdly selecting the preferred option. And so you've already touched on it. Of course, we're not going to go. We'll go into detail this afternoon. But a key way that SA informs plan making is by the appraisal of reasonable alternatives to inform selection of the preferred option. So that is a key place to look to understand how. And apologies if I flip between SA and IIA. I will try to stick to IIA. So that's a key place to look to see how IIA has informed plan making, that assessment of reasonable alternatives. So the next thing I would say is, so that was part one of the report. Part two of the report presents an assessment of the local plan as a whole. So that's essentially a narrative discussion under the assessment framework, which is a list of, I think, around 12 topic headings. So under each topic heading, the aim is to appraise the merits of the plan. So part two of the report as published at Reg 18 influenced that consultation, hopefully, in theory at least, and therefore informed consultations, responses, therefore hopefully informs plan making. Equally, the assessment published, set out in part two of the report at Reg 19, hopefully, at least in theory, informed representations that were made and is there to inform our discussions today. So that is I would say the two key ways that IIA sets out to inform plan making. Firstly, assess reasonable alternatives, both to inform finalisation of the plan for consultation and to inform the consultation itself. Secondly, assess the plan as a whole in order to inform the consultation.
Are there any specific examples of where the approach has changed, integrated assessment process, that actually, any examples of where there's actually been a change to the as a result of the IIA?
So, so there is also a requirement to set out recommendations as part of that assessment. It's as set out in part two of both of the reports, Reg 18 and Reg 19. And so I did just do a quick word search, and that is actually that's the only way to actually do it in the report, is to do a word search for recommended or recommendation. And there are several points within the appraisal in part two, the assessment within part two of the report, that both refers to past recommendations from the Regulation 18 stage and current recommendations, i.e. ones that went out at Reg 19 and remain in front of us today. So I personally do believe that's a relatively minor way that the IIA or SA can go about looking to influence plan making, because it's not easy to confidently make recommendations, because the assessment is being undertaken in silos, so under that framework, under each of the thematic headings in turn, whereas plan making isn't. Plan making is about striking a balance between competing issues, objectives, etc. And so so whilst there is a requirement to set out those recommendations, when I make a recommendation under one heading, I'm essentially being an advocate for that one issue at that point in time. I'm casting aside the need for plan making to always strike a balance, but nonetheless you do it. But what I actually believe most fundamentally, the way that IIA informs and SA informs plan making is by identifying the pros and cons, whether that be of reasonable alternatives or the plan as a whole, so that the council, the plan maker, can then respond clearly and explicitly, setting out that there is a balance and this is how we're striking the balance.
I think it's fair, just to add to that, I think it's fair to say that the spatial strategy and the options for growth have been the kind of primarily the focus in terms of strategic alternative. I think we have to remind ourselves that we are in a context that we have a regional plan in the London plan, which actually sets out, in quite a lot of detail, sort of policy positions and directs local plans in a particular direction. So whilst the IIA has been considering those policies in a whole, the local plan hasn't fundamentally strayed too far from the requirements set out in London plan, development management policies and that underpin it. It's really focused on the kind of spatial strategy, the kind of scenario which we'll want to discuss this afternoon.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious. I think we'll come back to that discussion. Reasonable alternative afternoon, context of the spatial strategy. Don't think anybody else made representations in relation to the integrated impact. Ms. Webb, can I just check if you just forgotten to put your nameplate down? Thank you. So just moving on to the habitats. To Dr. Best.
Thank you. Right, turning to habitats regulations, we've got some designated sites. If you can just remind us which of the sites have been assessed, please.
Mark, do you want to pick that up?
Actually, no, I didn't lead on the HRA for the local plan.
Okay, apologies. Yeah, apologies. I don't seem to have the document up at the moment, which I can do. Would it be possible for us to return to that question? Is that okay, or do you want to finalise these types of questions?
I think I'd like to try and get through this, and then we can take a break. So if someone's got a copy to hand, it'll help you, because I think you will sort of need them, because I want to move on to how they've been assessed. So I think you're possibly going to need the document to give us a good pointer to which pages and paragraphs that you want us to look at specifically. Thank you.
Income table 1 in the document sets out which sites have been considered as table 1.
Okay, apologies. Just to say, the officer who our expert in landscape and open space is actually unwell at the moment with COVID, so he's not here, which is why we're slightly on the back foot with this. But in terms of table 1, in terms of the designated sites, so you'll notice that none of these designated sites are within the borough, but they are within London, obviously. So we have Epping Forest, which is 9.4 kilometres north of the borough. We have Lee Valley, which is 9 kilometres north. Wimbledon Common, 10.2 kilometres west. Richmond Park, 12.4 west. And the Thames Estuary and Marshes, 26.4 kilometres.
And that's comprehensive. There are no other ones that are in the wider area.
No.
Thank you. And in terms of how the assessment has looked at those, so some HRAs use geographic zones, and others then assess through impact pathways. So I think yours is the impact pathway. So which potential pathways have been used in the assessment, and what do you think the key impacts on those sites? In summary. Thank you.
Yeah, so the key question is certainly thinking about the different impact pathways, and it's set out in the table of contents. Yeah, so beginning on page 13 of the report, it goes through 3 key impact pathways in turn. So firstly, recreational pressure, secondly, water quality and resources, and then thirdly, atmospheric pollution. So in other parts of the country, other plan contexts, there can be other impact pathways that warrant being explored, but in this context, given those designated sites, which we listed a moment ago, those are the 3 impact pathways that were looked at.
And through the screening exercise that you go through with an HRA, did that reveal any policy in the plan that could result in likely significant effects?
I know the answer to be no, but the conclusion, it is all important actually. It's actually it's a bit longer than I was expecting it to be, but it's section 5 of the report on page 22. It's actually a page of text, so I think we just skip oh, but it ends in a sentence in bold, so perhaps we can go straight there. But just before we go to that sentence in bold, the conclusions are on in page 22. It does look to set things out quite clearly. At the top of the page, it sets out the 5 designated sites, SACs, SPAs and Ramsars that were looked at. It then sets out the impact pathways considered, which are the ones I listed a moment ago. There's then a narrative, but then it does conclude with a sentence at the end that the Lewisham local plan will not result in a likely significant effect on any European designated sites, either alone or in combination. Yeah.
So that screening exercise revealing sort of policies, I think it did sort of pick up policy HO1, EC2 and the site allocations as having potential, didn't it? I think across the tables at the back, I can see the different colours, which is typical in these processes of green, amber and red. Were the policies and site allocations tested individually and in combination to sort of test how they work in practice?
So the tables that make up the bulk of the report with the red, amber, green shading, the vast majority being green, those tables do go through every policy in turn, certainly. I suspect they go through every site in turn, but I'd have to check. So I'll just defer to a colleague for a moment. So we think the assessment tables go through each policy in turn, and of course, under certain policies, the allocations sit. So we don't think the assessment tables go through each of the allocations in turn.
But presumably in terms of assessing policy HO1, the HRA would have assessed the scale overall of housing development and indeed.
Absolutely, yes. And that is the key question, is the scale of growth in the borough, much more so than the distribution, and certainly much more so than site-specific considerations.
Just for further clarity, if I may, Inspector Bust, the HRA, in going through the new local plans policies, in that consideration includes the place area principles and the place area and neighbourhood principles that the site allocations sit under that relevant part of the plan. So to summarise it, the totality of growth and its distribution across the borough in spatial strategy terms is assessed through that HRA process. Thank you.
Can I also just add that Appendix C in the HRA report lists all of the site allocations, and within that it has the indicative capacities within, so that have been taken into account in terms of the overall impacts.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Just to clarify, the sort of main reason, if you like, why the HRA concluded that the local plan would not result in likely significant effect on European designated sites, in just my understanding, would be largely the distance from those sites. Is that correct in terms of? We'll agree on that.
So just to finish off on HRA, in terms of Natural England or anyone else, did anyone have any concerns about the HRA, its process or its outcome?
Certainly those statutory bodies that we consult and engage with and work in partnership with raise no concerns. I think all of the, just for complete clarity, all of the representations received at Regulation 19 have been published and made available to the examination. Having personally gone through them individually, I certainly came across no objections or comments that were specific or challenged the habitat regulations assessment process.
Thank you for that. So obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the full schedule of proposed modifications and the changes, and if there are any changes to the site allocations, etc., may need to have the HRA looked at alongside sustainability appraisal. So just bear that in mind as we go along.
Our party is happy to have a probably much needed break for 15 minutes. So if we could return 11:30, is that acceptable to everyone? We shall adjourn for now. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're all back. So we're back in, hearing is resumed. So we're going to look at the strategic policies part of the agenda now, please. So this is going to look at sort of the identification of it and whether the question is are they genuinely strategic, and what potential additional work might need to be done on this particular part. Now, part of our initial questions asked the Council to provide the explanation of the rationale behind the policies in the plan, how you went about determining whether they're strategic or not. So we've got that. And I think the NPPF gives us some guidance on what's strategic and non-strategic. I say some, so that takes us somewhere, but we've still got to do some interpretation of that. So I think paragraph 20 is sort of about it's talking about provision of things in policies, not necessarily the detail. So, you know, the way we sort of think about it is strategic policies designed to address the area's strategic priorities, and then leaving the details of what you might see in planning applications to more development management criterion. And the NPPF also reminds us that non-strategic policies in local plans and neighbourhood plans could deal with allocation. So it's not just the strategic policies that you might look at to allocate sites. I think when you pick up the HRA, if you've still got a copy of that to handy, I think in Appendix B on that actually gives some commentary, which I think is quite helpful. I know it's for two different processes, but when you look at that, it says some are just development management policies and the details. So taking everything in the round and looking at all of the evidence, that's sort of what we're taking into account. So it might be helpful to have a plan handy. So if we've got a plan handy. Two, haven't you? So I think from your statement, the extra work that you've done in terms of the tables, I think is helpful, and that's actually very useful to demonstrate where policies have come from. And I think what struck us from that list is obviously some of the core strategy policies, one policy, and we've now got quite a few that have come from that. And so the question that was going around in our mind was, how did your monitoring reveal that core strategy needed to be, I was going to say exploded into multiple ones, but how did the monitoring tell you that you perhaps needed more policies in this plan?
I'm not sure if it was a case of monitoring as such, but it was when we were having discussions with all those different groups that we touched upon this morning, where we were asking people what they thought was needed in the plan, and some of those policies from the core strategy they felt could be dealt with in more detail. Also, since the core strategy days, we've had lots of different new regulations and NPPF guidance coming out, which meant that the core strategy was rather out of date. And to deal with that, we felt that we needed to expand on some of those policies into multiple ones.
Can I just add to that? I think when we started engaging with councillors through this process and community groups through the process, one of the things that we kept on hearing was, how does this plan relate to us? You know, and I think we recognise that the core strategy in its current form is a very high-level strategic document, which you know, obviously is good in terms of it sets out the that kind of high-level policy background, but in terms of being relatable for our communities, for our councillors, they felt there was a disconnect there, which is why we looked at the plan, and particularly part 3 of the plan, Lewisham's neighbourhood and places, is essentially it's taking the spatial strategy and breaking that down into 5 sub-areas and then providing more detail around those key policies. And that is an area where we've had broad support from the community, from councillors who can now see how this document will affect change within their neighbourhood, and something that's been relatively positively received.
That's useful to know. So feedback has led you to look at that in a different way. So how did you also think about some criteria possibly beyond the NPPF's high level guidance that we've got? So did you have some particular criteria that you used to review your policies in terms of deciding that strategic or non-strategic? That's what we're sort of focused on at the moment.
Yeah, I guess it was, you know, looking at the NPPF guidance, and, you know, as you say, it isn't crystal clear, and then, you know, officer judgment in terms of what we think is strategic and non-strategic. You know, I don't think there was a conversation or a clear set of criteria to assess that, but it was more a kind of judgment call on this.
So in terms of that judgment that you've made, what would you say therefore makes a strategic policy in your plan?
I think I'll defer to Angela, who's done an awful lot of work on this.
I guess just to say from the start that the previous colleague had done this work on our behalf. He's obviously left the council now, but when we saw your questions, we did do a complete review of all of the policies, and we do feel that obviously there are a lot of strategic policies, but when we looked at them against the NPPF, did show that the majority do have some kind of impact on the spatial strategy, and that was the criteria that we were using. So whether it's going to have an impact on the housing growth or the economic impact on the borough or open space. So a lot of the policies, even though they've got development management requirements within them, they've also got strategic level statements within them as well. And hence the reason why we've put them more in the strategic policies.
Now we could go through the policies and talk about each one individually, but obviously that would take us quite some time, so we're not possibly going to do this. I mean, we were wondering whether one option would be to identify the elements that are in the policy that are strategic and the elements of the policy that are non-strategic. Whether that may work very easily for some. Typically, if you might have part A, you know, criterion A, you could put a subheading and it's strategic, and then the rest of it is more sort of development management things. As I say, we're not necessarily going to go through each policy. We're certainly not going to go through each policy in the session. So we wondered whether that would be an action point in order just to clarify the difference between. So it's not saying that the policies are not strategic, but it's just to be a bit clearer on what are the strategic guiding principles, and then what are the things that you would then use in decision making. how do the council feel about that?
I think some of the policies are quite long, aren't they? So policy H01 does have strategic elements in it, but arguably it also has some DM sort of style criteria in there as well. So we were discussing the best way forward, because I'm not sure it's necessarily going to be as simple to try and separate out the strategic elements of the policy from the non-strategic elements of the policy. I think possibly a way forward that we were discussing is just taking a step back and thinking, you know, is this policy mainly going to be used by developers and the public to look at in terms of the determination of planning applications? So your criteria-based development management policies are not going to be strategic policies. They may have a link into the spatial strategy, but their main and sole purpose is going to be to guide the consideration of future planning applications. I think those policies are the ones that need to come out of the you know, the strategic policies list, and I think there are quite a few in there, aren't there? There may be a little bit of a tenuous link through to the spatial strategy, but I think particularly in the context of having the London plan in place, which is a sort of strategic element of the plan making process, I think there is a need to just take a step back and think, is that policy really strategic? And I think it's not something we do here, but I think the council does need to look at that. I do appreciate that you've already done that to a degree, but I think there are some policies in there which are more development. So rather than go through and do that in the hearing, you know, in the hearing session today, is that something we can leave as an action point?
Yes, we can certainly do that.
I think as well as we're going through the various matters, if there are any policies that particularly stand out as being a DM style policy, we'll flag that up as we go through as well. Just kind of bear that in mind when we're doing the other matters.
And as part of that work that you've already done, you obviously identified one or two errors that you'd spotted subsequently. So I mean, things, those sorts of typographical errors and things that you've picked up throughout, they would be additional modifications. So we wouldn't be expecting to see those on the main modifications list, but just to keep an eye on those as you go along. And it may be that we spot other ones, because proofreading takes far longer than anyone ever imagined. So as we work towards the end, I think I'm going to leave strategic policies there and leave the action point for later. Ms. Malloy?
Thank you. Just moving on to the next question in relation to equalities, and have all relevant groups with protected characteristics been identified? Have their needs been considered in preparing the plan? I think we touched on the consultation side of it. I suspect those seldom heard groups that you referred to overlap with groups with protected characteristics to a degree. But how does the council feel that the needs of those protected groups or groups with protected characteristics have been taken into account?
Yeah, I think obviously the consultation and the targeted events that we did gave a good insight into what the key issues are. And I don't think it will surprise anybody that the key issues were around jobs and the prospect of employment. They were around housing, and particularly genuinely affordable housing. And then there was other issues to do with access to local spaces and infrastructure as well, all of which I think are addressed within the plan and the policies, but also in the plan preparation. clearly evidence-based, such as the strategic housing market assessment, looking at affordability within the borough, and then how the policies then translated into the need for genuinely affordable housing, and a 50% target is absolutely critical. Also, in terms of the employment policies in our town centre policies, trying to ensure those town centres are thriving economic hubs, which is a clear strategic objective within the plan. So I think you can see from the vision through to the objectives, through to the policies which underpin those objectives, how those key concerns or areas that were identified through that consultation and through other work that the council is doing with our seldom heard groups, you know, hopefully will help that process. And then obviously there's the equalities assessment, which is part of the integrated impact assessment, which you know, Mark can pick up any kind of detailed questions that you have.
Thank you. And what were the key headlines in terms of the equality assessment, in terms of the either potential positive or negative impacts on equality groups?
Yeah, thank you. So in the IIA report, so just firstly, section 3, what's the scope of the IIA? It's got a subheading explaining how equalities impact assessment was integrated in practice. And as part of that, it signposts to Appendix 3, where there's a standalone discussion. So if I just quickly go to Appendix 3, which is where we'll sort of find an answer to your question. So Appendix 3 is titled EQIA, so it's that standalone discussion of the effects of the plan in terms of equalities issues. And it firstly goes through a process of screening protected characteristics. And then in light of that screening process, there's a discussion of key equalities issues / impacts. And there's there's 6 or 7 subheadings, which I'll quickly just run through. The first subheading is air and noise pollution. So discussion of how the plan will affect that, and then in turn potentially have resulting issues / impacts for groups with protected characteristics. So that's the first one. Then green infrastructure, flood risk, housing density / tall buildings, heat pumps and heat networks, strategic area of regeneration, which is a designation within the plan in the borough, cap for town centre regeneration. That's got quite a lengthy discussion because there's quite a lot of important things to unpack under that heading. District centre regeneration, existing community facilities, so the question of protecting, etc. Housing, of course, mixed-use redevelopment of industrial land. That's something that actually was quite a focus of the IIA process throughout. So that the question of what the plan is proposing to do in that regard. Estate regeneration, of course, and then the final heading is waste management. So that's the headings within that appendix.
These all identified as positive impacts.
So, you know, there are undoubtedly, I'm sure there are tensions. You know, no plan is perfect. Any plan, you know, for example, capital town centre regeneration, there are issues and tensions to explore, and it's a case of you know, addressing those tensions as best as possible. But yeah, there are certainly plenty of positive effects discussed.
And were any clear negative impacts on groups identified? So how did the plan?
So this appendix doesn't end with a conclusion. I think in retrospect, perhaps might have been a good idea if there was one. But there is a concluding discussion within the main report, which I'll just go to now quickly. So within part 2 of the report, which presents an assessment, IIA, of the plan as a whole under the IIA framework, it's explained that the key place to find a discussion of equalities, issues and impacts is under the communities brackets wider issues heading, so it's section 9.8. So this is within part 2 of the report, section 9.8. And that presents an assessment of the plan as a whole under that heading. And there is a concluding discussion. It's on page 91. So the concluding discussion begins at paragraph 9.81.13, but then it reaches its absolute conclusion on paragraph 9.8.15. And ultimately, it concludes positive effects. There's some associated discussion that goes along with that.
Risk of sounding like Jeremy Paxton. So you quite answered my question there in terms of if there were any negative effects.
So there's no conclusion of negative effects on any groups with protected characteristics.
You referred to there being tensions in terms of, you know, the potential impacts within topic areas that you and I'm just sort of trying to get to the bottom of how any potential negative impacts are balanced against.
So no major tensions, you know, come to mind particularly, but they're explored under those thematic headings within Appendix 3. You know, before the conclusion is reached, that there's no significant concerns.
Just in terms of the, you know, the quality impact assessment that was embedded within the IIA, are there any changes made to the plan as a result of the qualities impact assessment where there's an issue may have been flagged up, for example, and then an alteration made?
I'll give a brief answer, and I think a colleague will come in, but in that concluding paragraph, which I referenced a moment ago, it does actually refer back to the conclusion at the Reg 18 interim IIA stage, and it explains that work has, it specifically references work in respect of, I read it a moment ago, the A21 development framework, and it's supportive of the fact that the plan between the Reg 18 stage and the Reg 19 stage, that's a positive. It's improved the performance of the plan in respect of these communities, brackets, wider issues, performance of the plan under that heading.
I think generally speaking, the local plan and the policies within the local plan are very aware of trying to kind of improve the benefits for our residents and those equality impacts. Policies such as, you know, the public transport infrastructure, etc., housing, as I've mentioned. So there was an iterative process that, you know, we were looking at the equalities impact assessment, but there was no clear concerns that we had at the time, which was raising any red flags around those kind of issues, these thematic issues. We had that discussion with ACOM through that process. There were areas of work that we were in the process of doing, the 21 development framework, the Catford framework, which would provide further detail and evidence around that, but there was nothing specific that it flagged as a red flag.
Okay, thank you. So very much an iterative process, really, feeding in through different stages. That answers my questions in terms of the legal and procedural matters. So thank you very much for that. I'm aware, I don't know if you made representations in relation to, what were you wanting to raise there?
sorry. I believe I did within my, I'm trying to find the page now. Basically, I wanted to say about the protected characteristics and lesser heard voices. I don't know how red flags could be raised because we have a massive one at Belgreen and we have not been allowed to bring it up. There's been no consideration. We have they want to massive tall buildings without sorting out the fact we have a station which is not accessible. There's no lifts. It's half a mile from all the bus stops. Now we're working closely with TfL, Network Rail and Southeastern to try and bring on some improvements along with, and they're working with highways. But strategic planning doesn't seem to be aware of any of this, and we have not been allowed to bring it up. So that is all the disabled people or people with accessibility issues of various kinds at Lower Sydenham are massively disadvantaged. We haven't been able to flag it up at the table that this is a decision that needs, in order to allow for the expansion, we want to bring on the housing. And this sort of avoiding a difficult, really difficult issue, but the can has been kicked down the road for decades now. And this is actually, with the land banking and the refusal to make difficult decisions, I can't see it being viable. So anyway, I just wanted to say that, sorry.
I think you may have been straying a little bit from your original objections, but I've given you a little bit of leniency there. Would the council just like to come back on it?
I think we acknowledge the points that the participants have made around about Belgreen and Lower Sydenham. We think that the council is making the positive step identifying this area as a future opportunity area, and the positive step identifying it as future site allocations. I think we both agree, and forgive me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think we both agree that that area needs to be redeveloped in the future and needs to be redeveloped in a comprehensive manner. So I think there is a lot of agreement. The question is how and when, and maybe we can explore those in later sessions when we're particularly focused on the south area and the site allocations that
I think certainly in terms of the matters you raise in terms of accessibility, that would come often down to development management side of things rather than necessarily the local side of things. But I think, yes, I think you're right in terms of site allocations, that's probably to do with those issues which you're attending, I believe. Any other points in relation to equality? Okay, well, thank you. That wraps up matter one in terms of legal and procedural requirements. We are scheduled to move on to matter two in the duty to cooperate, which I don't believe Mr. Hall web you're scheduled to attend on. Is that? Give you the opportunity to escape while you can. We'll just have a moment just to allow them to leave. Just to check, has everyone got the agenda for the duty to cooperate? I think it's just ourselves and the council for this session. And just moving on to the first question in terms of the whether the council has complied with the duty to cooperate and the preparation of the plan. I'd firstly just like to ask the council just to give us a brief summary of the working arrangements that the council has with other organisations, other local authorities and the GLA in terms of the kind of plan making process.
Yeah, I can certainly provide an overview, and then I think I'll refer to Angela for the cooperation with our neighbouring boroughs. So in terms of our cooperation with the GLA, we regularly meet with the GLA. We have standing meetings with them relating to as you can imagine, lots of different matters, whether it's the development of frameworks and master plans that we're working collaboratively on, or specifically about the local plan process. So we've engaged them through each stage in the Regulation 18 and Regulation 19. That is through the formal consultation processes, but also following those up with meetings with various representatives from the GLA, i.e. around tall building policies, around the Bakerloo line extension, etc. Likewise with the Transport for London, again we have monthly meetings with them to discuss matters relating to Lewisham more broadly, but also as part of that process on the Bakerloo line extension and upgrade meetings as well. The TfL have obviously been engaged through the Regulation 18 and 19 consultation processes. And as I said, very similar arrangement to GLA, where we have met with them on numerous occasions to discuss matters relating to the plan preparation process. In terms of statutory kind of consultees and other infrastructure providers, again, we have a very kind of collaborative process with them. Our colleagues in the development contribution team are regularly updating the infrastructure delivery plan. So we've been engaging with our infrastructure providers through that process, which has gone through a number of iterations through the plan making process and has been published accordingly through the Regulation 18 and 19 consultations. And in terms of neighbouring boroughs, we have an established duty to cooperate group, which is the South East London duty to cooperate, which includes our neighbouring boroughs of Greenwich, Bexley, Bromley, Southwark. Have I forgotten? That's it. Where we discuss strategic matters in southeast London, including things like the waste management apportion across the southeast, but also strategic transport issues that have cropped up. And then, importantly, discussing issues of housing needs, housing delivery test, etc. Angela, is there any further detail that you want to add on that?
Yeah, I guess just to say that we try to meet quarterly. Sometimes we're very busy. Sometimes it doesn't happen quarterly, but we do try to do that. And in those meetings, we do provide updates on where our plan making has got to, including SPGs as well. SPDs, looking at key government policy changes that have occurred. Also, in the past, we've collaborated on evidence. For instance, we did a South East London schma at one point, which looked across the 4 or 5 different boroughs. And we also seek advice from them as well, just informal advice. We want to discuss, I don't know, the housing requirement, for instance. Also, as part of that group, we do attend a wider group, which is the All London Borough Planning Officers group, which is called ALPO, and that occurs every 2 months, I believe. That's held up with the JLA is leading on that. And that also is another forum where we can discuss different strategic matters at a relevant time. And also David just did mention about the waste group. So that's a separate group to the duty to cooperate group. And that one is where we're focusing specifically on the apportionment of waste.
Thank you, inspectors. Just so I don't feel left out, just to provide some clarity for the examination, and I appreciate this is likely to be something we hear of again. You have already heard it. These arrangements exist within the Mayor of London's London Plan context. So unlike other parts of the country which are not subject to statutory strategic planning, these arrangements, relationships and friendships exist within a formal structure and that sits under that aegis of the London Plan. What I would also add is that whilst colleagues from neighbouring authorities are not here today, as is sometimes the norm in other parts of the country where local plan preparation takes place, the relationship that we have with our South East London colleagues is overall extremely positive. We would hope that is reflected through the evidence submitted through to you. Having said that, there are some partners within that grouping that we work with more closely on specific strategic issues. And I'm very pleased to say that one of those partners will be attending later today. And I hope, again, that serves as a demonstration of the close working relationships that we have with that grouping across South East London. I'm without wishing to reveal sort of key plot devices, I'm certain that relationship will be fleshed out again on other matters. I suspect most notably Matter 4. Thank you.
Must be being more worried if the other authorities were here today and felt the need to be here. The fact they're not here probably speaks volumes. So thank you for that overview. Just in terms of the next question, what were the strategic cross-border matters which were identified through the plan preparation process?
Angela, do you want to pick that up?
I think there was a variety of them. Housing came top of the list. Transport, waste. We did look into community facilities, but we felt that those weren't necessarily strategic cross-boundary issues that we needed to deal with. Also, we've got the River Thames, the north of our borough, and that runs across 3 or 4 of the other boroughs as well. So that is an issue that we've discussed in the past. There's affordable housing, even though it can be dealt with within our borough. We do feel that it is an issue across the whole of South East London, and indeed London itself. So that was another issue that we have considered as well.
I mean, the duty to cooperate statement sets out the issues, sub-issues within how those issues identified and in discussion with partner organisations.
Yes. Angela, I don't know if you want to clarify, but yes, we had identified those strategic issues or objectives, and then we discussed those within that formal setting and agreed on.
And also, I think that they did come out within the discussions with community groups as well. And also just the issue about how we've got a higher level tier of guidance at the London plan level as well. So that does restrict some of the strategic issues that you can deal with because they're already dealt with above.
Okay, thank you. And through the duty to cooperate process with the organisations within that framework that you've identified, were any substantial concerns raised in terms of compliance with the duty to cooperate as you've gone through that process?
No.
We'll come on to it later, but I think early on when you were looking at trying to accommodate these, the housing need arising from the standard methodology, that was flagged up, wasn't it, as an area of concern, for example, from GLA. The council's obviously taken on board in terms of just rolling London plan.
Yes, apologies. I should expand on my answer. There is no significant issues now. There were a number of concerns raised by the GLA, which we have sought to resolve and have resolved, and that is evident within their statement of common ground. Initially, prior to the adoption of the London plan, we also looked at, as the council would, the option of accommodating the LHN figure, and again that was a key concern by the GLE, again because they are responsible for that strategic matter at a London-wide level. On those particular issues, I can't recall any particular concerns, and as I said, we have now statements of common grounds from all of those organisations, effectively strongly supporting the plan, and the GLA have now withdrawn their issues of conformity around the two particular matters from their Regulation 9 consultation.
Okay, thank you. We'll come on to some of those matters later on in the discussion. In our initial questions, we did raise some concerns in the initial questions in terms of the sort of record, if you like, of the meetings and whether there's sufficient record of the meetings, workshops, discussions, etc. And I think also a particular point we raised in relation to where organisations didn't respond. There did seem to be a number of organisations which you had flagged up as not responding to your efforts to engage them in the discussion. So we sort of asked you to provide details of, you know, how you attempted to follow up those organisations who hadn't responded. And just, I mean, generally, I think in terms of the additional information you've provided, that's really helpful. That's helped to plug some of those gaps that we were concerned about. So I'm not going to go through all of that information here. We can take that for read. I think just in relation to the organisations who didn't respond to the request to engage, what was your approach to follow those organisations up? How many attempts were made to follow up those organisations? And also, if you could elaborate, you say in your statement that you exercised judgment in relation to, you know, whether to persist with following up those organisations. If you could expand on how you did that and what factors did you take into account?
I will attempt to sort of start the council's answer, if that's okay, inspectors, and Angela and I can box and cox in terms of the detail. My understanding was that I can use a particular example of where we were unable to engage with potential duty to cooperate partners. So this was in relation to the local housing need and the thorny question of whether unmet or unmeetable need could be met by possible partners beyond the borough's administrative boundary. The council, going through that process, identified a number of possible candidates to engage with on that subject, all beyond, I believe, Angela, the administrative boundary of Greater London, so outside of the London Plan area. Again, in my experience, that's not an unusual exercise for London authorities to go through in terms of trying to resolve or evidence this the consideration of this particular matter. Those authorities obviously historically would have worked under the umbrella of the former South East Plan. Obviously, they now exist in a if I can put it so honestly, in a strategic planning vacuum, and are certainly historically have been left to their own devices. I'm aware that some authorities are banding together and preparing voluntary strategic plans. But on the whole, the point in making that, identifying that point, is that they're essentially housing market areas beyond our own, and consider this particular issue in a different manner, the sort of policy off rather than the policy on approach that the London Plan takes to identifying a local housing need figure and then distributing it is done differently. In terms of quantifying your question, I believe we pursued those contacts 3 times. And the judgment that we exercised was that as they are, as I explained, beyond Greater London's boundary, exist in a different statutory environment, that they well, there's a further assumption that they are unable to meet need from beyond their own boundaries, which is indeed a commonly encountered situation across the nation. I don't know if you want to add anything, Angela.
I guess just to say on that particular matter, we did meet with Dartford regarding strategic matters, including unmet need, and they were unable to help take on our need. We did attempt to discuss with Tandridge, they did not respond. We did send a number of emails requesting to meet. That didn't take place. Likewise with a lot of other strategic duty to cooperate bodies, we did reach out to those first, and the majority of them we have had responses back in terms of either representations through Regulation 19, or we've had individual meetings with them, and some of them we have now got statements of common ground.
Patience and persistent pace is often. Okay, thank you. Just in terms of the additional information provided, that was really helpful. Can we have that as an action point to formally append that additional information to the duty to cooperate statement? I think it's already been done, but I think just to urge it as a formal. You referred to the statements of ground. I know there has been a number of statements of common ground come in fairly recently. We're sort of working our way through those still. Are there any other statements of common ground which are anticipated to come in? Are there any outstanding statements of common ground? And if so, what's the time frame for doing those?
As an opening response, we do continue to work with partners. I think that the SOCG process is in many respects a live process, perhaps more alive with some partners than with others. But we do continue to prepare, and hopefully we will submit further statements of common ground, principally with development industry partners, I should add. I would like to hand over to my colleague Kanoya Kabir, who can perhaps give you the sort of a detailed update of where we are and where we anticipate further statements coming in, so that you have fair warning.
Can I just add, in terms of the development industry statements of common ground, whilst it's not a requirement to kind of submit development partners' statement of common ground, we felt that it was prudent to do so, particularly for a 5-year land supply. And what I would say is that we generally have very positive working relationships with our development partners, and hopefully that is evident in the statements of common ground and evident through the public hearings when our participants will be joining us from the industry. There are areas where we disagree, as you would imagine, and areas around indicative capacities, etc., which will be challenged. And that is the kind of that's the delay. Those are the kind of delays to the statements of common ground. Ideally, we would have had those wrapped up and we would have submitted those prior to the public hearing. So, apologies for that. But it is taking us a bit of time, and Kanoya is working incredibly hard to try to get those over the line. Again, what I would say is that for the bulk of our partners, particularly for those 5-year land supplies, we will have those statements of common grounds in place, and they will be positive.
And you hit the nail on the head there in terms of the importance of statements of common ground, in terms of the delivery of sites, particularly in the 5-year land period. And obviously, there is a week's break before we start the site allocation hearing sessions, but we only have so much capacity to take on board information, so we would prefer to see those submitted as soon as possible, preferably by the close of these first 2 weeks hearings, just to give us time to have a look at those and digest those. I appreciate it's not all within your hands. It may depend on the responses of partners. Yeah, it'd be useful to have an update as to when they're doing.
Yeah, so by way of update, we have submitted all of our key infrastructure delivery SOCGs and all our SOCGs with our neighbouring boroughs. As David mentions, the outstanding ones are with landowners and agents of those sites that fall within our 1 to 5 year housing supply. We've submitted a number of those already, and we're quite far into the process of finalising the remainder that we would like to have finished by the start of the second round of sessions. And our intention is to feed them through to you as soon as we have them. And in our Statement of Common Ground background paper, it lists the outstanding statements there.
Just to add, we hear your requests, so you're suggesting that we get those to you by the end of the second week sessions, which is if we can get them to you on the 1st of July, is that acceptable? It's a Monday. Okay, we'll aim to get those on the 28th then, Friday the 28th, if at all possible, yeah. Yeah, that would be very helpful. And again, just to reassure you that the reason these are taking so long is, dare I say, our partners are using this opportunity to make some changes or to suggest changes to the site allocations. What they're not doing is disputing the fact that these sites are deliverable and available. And obviously we have indicative capacities within the local plan, and those are indicative capacities. They are the starting point. Most of our development partners understand that, but it's not a question about these sites not being available and deliverable. It's a matter of detail. So I think that would be very helpful if we chivvy them along.
It helped to focus mine. It may just be worth having discussed the sites, and from a delivery point of view, just saying how we generally approach looking at site allocations and also dealing with housing land. We have the housing land supply session towards the end of the hearing sessions. We do that because during the course of the consideration of the various site allocations, there are inevitably discussions about the timing and delivery of those sites. In my experience, the time estimates for sites coming forward are usually overly optimistic. There is generally those sites often get pushed back into the period, but we need to take each site on its own merits. So before the housing land supply session, we'll need an updated trajectory which sets out the changing capacity of the site, for example, of capacity, or any changes in terms of when that site's coming from. So just to be aware of that, be sort of flag that up. We'll hopefully keep track of those indicative capacities and then timing and phasing delivery of sites, put those into a revised trajectory, and then when we come to consider matter 15, the housing land supply, will have a very up-to-date picture of the housing land supply. So just to flag that up, I know I have just raised a few queries in relation to the housing land supply tables that were provided, but that's generally how we would deal with the housing land supply allocations. So just to be aware of that, and I think that's why it's important to get those statements of common sooner rather than later, so that we know where we stand in relation to housing land supply. So I digressed a little bit, but I thought it might be worth flagging that up. Just returning back to the agenda, in relation to statements of common ground, there's the Network Rail statement of common ground, which I believe won't be available till after the elections.
That is correct, and that is, I think, for reasons already explained via the programme officer, that as a national public body, they have political sensitivities that they need to respect, and we anticipate once the 4th of July has happened, we would hope to progress to a signing of their SOCG. I would reinforce the statement that we passed through to the inspectors, that statement of common ground is ready, and that there is a positive, or at least there was prior to the 4th of July, a positive position between those two partners.
I also have a note of the Healthy Living Urban Development Unit. Is that still in progress, or is that coming?
That was submitted to you yesterday.
Any other strategic partners in terms of statements of common ground that we're anticipating?
No.
Okay, thank you. Just moving on to, we've sort of already touched on it to a degree in terms of the next question, in terms of overall housing provision. Firstly, I think if the council can just summarise briefly who the council's engaged with in terms of the overall housing provision and what the outcome of that engagement was.
Yeah, so I can give a opening statement, and then maybe I'll hand across to Angela to fill in some of the details. So obviously we are a London borough, and obviously kind of housing requirements are a strategic matter which is defined in the London plan. I think I touched upon it earlier that prior to the adoption of the London plan, the council considered the option of looking at the LHN and did look at the LHN and trying to accommodate that. This was post the London Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment, the SHLA, which it clearly identified that in terms of accommodating that need, it would be impossible for the London Borough of Lewisham to meet that need. We did at that time, through the Duty to Cooperate meeting, have a discussion and meetings with our neighbouring boroughs who were very clear that they could not meet our LHN figures, and also questioned why we were using the LHN figures and not the London plan. Likewise, we had several meetings with the GLA who again questioned why we were not using the draft London plan figures as it was then. Subsequent to the adoption of the London plan in 2021, we reverted to using those targets, which, you know, again, I don't think anybody is questioning from a Regulation 18 and 19 point of view our stance. Those are the figures that, as I say, are handed down from the London plan at that kind of regional level. That's 1,667 homes per annum over a 10-year period. We have chosen to roll forward the London plan requirement. I don't know if you want me to touch upon that now or whether I should leave that to another question.
Clearly, tomorrow's session will be exploring that a little bit more in terms of the merits of doing that. I think what I just wanted to focus on today in the context of duty to cooperate is more the discussions that we had around the decision to roll forward the London plan target. I totally appreciate that the London plan is a strategic plan within which the council has to work. It does, however, only set the target for 10 years. The plan goes beyond that, and it does give some guidance, the London plan, in terms of how authorities can look to set a housing target beyond the 10-year period in terms of looking at SHLA and capacity within the SHLA. But I think I wanted to focus in today's session really in the discussions that took place around that. So in terms of whether to go for the local housing need figure, the rolling forward of the London plan target, the implications that may have in terms of the wider impacts in terms of the demography and potential impact on other boroughs in terms of potentially not meeting that need, if you like, in terms of the higher housing need identified in the standard method. So it's more around the discussions and engagement that took place on that particular key point.
Yeah, I can pick up at a high level. So obviously we did discuss with the GLA that approach and strategy about rolling forward the 10-year housing supply. I have to say it's a fairly standard approach within London, and we did explore and look at other local plans that were going through the examination process at that time. For example, Lambeth and Bexley, who have subsequently had their plans adopted. And also note that the London Borough of Ealing, who are at the Regulation 19 stage, have also chosen to take that approach. Nevertheless, we did discuss it with our GA